Chapter 87. Say hello to the new gods. Summary. Be afraid. Mina smiled, wide and full of teeth, as the latest pair of cuffs she'd attached to a cherry-red dragon's wrists snapped into place against the wall. They'd already covered most of the first floor and were just about to go to the second. A good portion of the villains now either attached to various metal surfaces, barred in supply closets with no longer working control panels, or simply lying unconscious on the ground. Nuella and Squawkle were scary efficient in the takedown of the ship. She'd never been to a raid back on Earth, but she couldn't imagine they could possibly be much better than this pirate crew. It was so exciting! She was learning so much for when they started raiding ships on their own. But despite their progress, no one was any closer to finding the princess, and they'd already been a known presence on the ship for a few minutes. A lot can happen in that time, like some of the dragon aliens doing something to the princess. This good old-fashioned sweep was not working fast enough. Something needed to change before something could go wrong. What could she do? Well, the problem was that they didn't know where the princess was. But these dragon guys definitely did. She just had to get them to spill the tea. How? Well, what were some rumored gods to do when they wanted something? Ask nicely? Nah. So, when a flash of tangerine scales showed itself, she didn't hesitate to attack. Given they were on a ship where the floor was also a wall full of important wires and pipes that protected them from the void, she couldn't use her acid to skate around like she normally would. But that didn't stop her from extending her previously unused scythe to full length and hooking the end around the bigger alien's legs. The thick scales meant he was still in possession of all his limbs, but the opportune placing meant he was no longer able to stop gravity from knocking him to the ground. With practiced ease, Mina flipped over the downed alien, landing with an open cuff right on his left hand, outstretched from an attempt at stopping his collision with the ground. On instinct, he tried to use his free hand to grab her, but that just brought it in perfect range to snag the other cuff around. These aliens may be big and strong, but fast and coordinated wasn't quite as up their alley. Mina brought the now buzzing cuffs up to the nearby wall, and they snapped into place. The alien struggled in his bounds, tugging with all his muscly might, but the cuffs didn't budge, and the low placement of the wall meant he couldn't even sit up. Splayed on his back, perfect. Right where she wanted him. The sounds of struggle around them seemed to be muffled as she walked to stand in front of the dragon's downed form. Sure, he was bigger than her, but as she loomed over him, eyes alight and grin stretched, she didn't think he felt so big. My, what do we have here? She giggled, trying to channel her best eldritch god. Seems like you've got something we want. Mind telling me where the princess is? Despite the orange dragon shrinking back in his scales, eyes darting around as if he were looking for an escape that didn't exist, for help that wouldn't come, he leveled her a glare. A weak glare, but a determined one nonetheless. Mina let some acid pool in her hands. The pH wasn't low enough to eat through tough scales, but it would be enough to sting. You sure about that? It doesn't seem like the smartest choice right now. You've heard of us, right? I'm sure you know what my acid can do. You wouldn't. The dragon choked out, sounding like he was trying to convince himself. Oh, she definitely would, Kotsky said, sauntering up beside her with his classic feral grin. You should have seen what she did to the baby she had to take care of for an assignment. That thing didn't even look like a person by the end. She had to hand it back in a bag to stop it from leaking everywhere. If Mina thought the alien looked scared before, he was absolutely terrified now. And okay, that did sound bad, but Kotsky was leaving out that melting the fake baby had been a complete accident. Who thought it was a good idea to give hero students a project where they couldn't let their fake baby out of their sight? Poor Ripley never stood a chance against hero training. At last, that got the guy to start talking. Well, More whimpering, but within a few seconds, Mina was delivering the princess's location over the comms. Izuku heard the location of the princess, but didn't change course. Ochako and Kole were on the second floor, same as the princess, while Izuku and Moyue had skipped to the third, headed straight for the cockpit. The only way they were letting this end was with the entire criminal crew contained and ready to be arrested, and the easy way to do that was to attack the head of the operation. Now, with the princess soon to be in their custody and out of immediate danger, Izuku's little pair was free to attack as soon as they arrived. Problem was, the cockpit was bound to be the most heavily guarded place on the ship, even more so than the princess. Moyue spoke softly as they scanned the halls for the control room. "We can't attack head-on. It'll be too well fortified, and my fighting style is geared towards mid-range ambush." "Huh, just like Aizawa-sensei." "We'll need some sort of distraction. If we can even get through the doors, that is." Despite Mei's voice abruptly ringing through the comms, neither Izuku nor Moyue startled. "I've got basic control over the ship thanks to that little doohickey baby, which includes things like opening doors and shutting off lights. The organization for the ship's systems is a little funky, but I think I've got it. Just tell me where you are and I can get the door open." "Don't think I missed that little light comment, Mei," Izuku rebutted. He could hear the manic grin when she spoke. "You know the branding never stops, and everything is scarier in the dark. Horror movies say so." Izuku could hear a faint, "What's a horror movie?" over the comms in Hugh's deep timbre, but Mei barreled on. "I trust you'll eldritch up on your side." Izuku chuckled. "I think I can manage." He turned to Moyue. "Alliance ship regulations dictate that all ship cockpits must have at least 2 exits, so if I draw their attention at this one, you can sneak through the other one and take them out." Moyue smiled as a few darts found their way between her fingers. "Looks like some of you were paying attention in class after all." The hall was silent. Not a sound to be heard outside of the panicked cockpit. Someone was on their ship. Multiple someones. And they were after the princess. The very princess that was supposed to net them enough to coast easy for the rest of the year. So the state of current affairs had left those in the cockpit in a frenzy, desperate to salvage the situation. They were so distracted, it took the lights fizzling out above and plunging them into darkness to realize that the hall just outside was no longer silent. In an instant, hectic strategizing left the air, and all eyes were locked on the door. Well, less the door, and more whatever lay unseen beyond it. Because out there, out in the twisting halls, was a heavy set of footsteps. They didn't carry the same heft one of their kind did. Instead, each heavy footfall felt the way a leviathan creature's footsteps did when muffled underwater. True weight disguised by the water surrounding them. True horror hidden by the suffocating expanse surrounding the being. They were not underwater, yet the feeling prevailed. Then, another sound pierces the echoing quiet. A scratch of metal on metal, an out-of-tune symphony that sent shivers down one's spine. The horrid screech came in and out of being, like some twisted harmony to the even closer sound of heavy footsteps. Then, the melody drifted in, too quiet at first to make out among the mockery of a backing track, present long before the first horrified whimper was dragged out at its detection. It was the sound of humming, a soft minor lilt that had no right to be seeping under the door from out with that creature. The sound swirled around each resident in the cockpit. Unlike charming lullabies parents often use to comfort their children, the weight that settled over them was not safe or warm, but an icy, unplaceable warning that closed in on all sides. Where the humming stopped, the singing started, transforming without warning from one breath to the next. Where the humming was unsettling, The singing was haunting in a way that pulled straight from unknowable depths. The words, though undoubtedly words, they were spoken in a tongue none knew, ringing clear and melodic as words came in and out of being. None of them even realized how close the sound had drawn until the door, the only thing separating them from the vast unknown, slid open without a sound. And there, standing in the darkness, paused mid-step in its creeping approach, was a being from stories. Though few and far between, even they had heard the stories of the new gods. In their ignorance, they'd brushed off the silly tales as nothing more than fiction. But there was nothing fictional about the figure staring them down with acrid green eyes. By the time the figure from the other side of the room began its assault on its inhabitants, it's impossible to tell which screams stem from the poison-tipped projectiles or from the terror that rips itself from throats at the god that is just lit up with the glow of a collapsing star.